Imagine having the ability to make a man think about you throughout his day without flooding him with messages, without overdoing it, and without trying to be someone you're not. Sometimes it's not about effort or perfection at all. It can come down to something as simple as a few words said with the right intention. Those words can decide whether you're easily forgotten or whether you leave a quiet emotional imprint that stays with him. And no, this isn't about tricks or cheesy lines you see in movies. There's no illusion here. What really matters is understanding how attraction works at a psychological level. According to the work of Carl Jung, the strongest human connections are rarely logical. They're emotional, symbolic, and deeply rooted in the unconscious mind. We aren't drawn to people just for what we see on the surface, but for what they represent internally, often without even realizing it.
Jung once explained that until you bring the unconscious into awareness, it will shape your life while you call it fate, one asti, one thus and thoughtful. That idea opens something important. If unconscious emotions guide attraction, then communication can reach that level too. Most conversations don't. Most people start in the most neutral way possible, like, "Hey, how are you?"
Or "How was your day?" It's polite, but it doesn't create impact. The problem isn't that you said something wrong. It's that nothing you said triggered emotion. And without emotion, there's no memory. The mind doesn't hold on to plain words. It holds on to feelings and the images those feelings create. Jung emphasized that emotion is what anchors experience in the mind. So if nothing emotional is activated, nothing stays. That's why some interactions fade instantly. Not because you lack value, but because the language used doesn't connect to anything deeper inside him. The shift happens when you stop thinking about just talking and start thinking about emotional impact. When words carry feeling, they stop being ordinary. They start becoming memorable. Think about how often conversations go nowhere. It's usually not about appearance or personality, but about energy. Many women believe they need to impress, to be flawless, or to say everything perfectly. But attraction doesn't work that way. The unconscious responds more to emotional symbolism than logic or perfection. If he keeps receiving the same predictable messages from different people, everything starts to blur together. You don't want to be part of that background noise. The goal is to stand out in a way that feels natural, not forced. Overcompensating with long messages or too much intensity often does the opposite. It pushes people away instead of pulling them closer. So instead of trying harder, the shift is in awareness. Speak in a way that feels alive, not rehearsed. Attraction isn't just about what is said, but how it lands emotionally. The feeling it creates is what lingers. Picture a simple moment. You see him in a coffee shop. Most people would say something safe like, "Is this seat taken?" Or, "Are you waiting for someone?" Nothing wrong with it, but it disappears instantly. Now imagine instead you smile lightly and say, "You and I need to settle something. Is this place actually good coffee, or is it just pretending?" The difference isn't just the words. It's the interruption of his normal mental pattern. It creates curiosity. It adds energy. It makes him pay attention without effort or pressure. That small disruption becomes a memory because it carries emotional texture. This is what psychological resonance looks like. A moment that lingers without forcing itself. He may not even fully understand why, but something about it stays with him. And that brings us to a simple but powerful phrase, you and me. It sounds ordinary, almost too simple to matter, but its impact isn't in the grammar, it's in the implication. When you say you and me, you're not asking for permission. You're creating a shared mental picture. You're subtly suggesting connection, possibility, and a moment that already includes both of you. In psychological terms, it becomes symbolic language. It bypasses logic and speaks directly to imagination. Instead of requesting a response like, "Do you want to go out with me?" which hands over control, a phrase like, "You and me should go out this weekend," shifts the energy completely. It doesn't wait for approval. It creates direction. And that subtle difference is where perception begins to change. It's a confident vision, and that's exactly what makes it leave a trace. Let's bring it into a real moment. You're getting to know someone, the conversation is easy, everything feels natural. Instead of saying something like, "I love talking to you," which is nice but predictable, imagine saying, "You and me could have dangerously good conversations." Feel that shift. It's light, a little playful, and it carries energy. Most importantly, it quietly plants an idea in his mind without you asking for anything directly. That's often how perception begins to change. And why does something like this even work? Because those three words can reflect qualities men tend to notice deeply in a woman: confidence, clarity, and initiative. Confidence because you're not asking for permission. You're expressing something with certainty. Clarity because you're not being vague about your energy or intent. Initiative because you're not just reacting, you're participating in shaping the interaction. But here's where many people get it wrong. This isn't about repeating "you and me" like a trick or dropping it into every conversation. Its effect depends entirely on timing, tone, and emotional presence. If it comes out nervous, rushed, or unsure, it loses everything. But if it's said calmly, with relaxed eye contact, and a soft, natural smile, the entire meaning changes. It stops being just words and becomes an impression. So the real question isn't just what to say, but when and how. Rule 1 is timing. It only works when there's already a sense of comfort or connection. Not necessarily deep chemistry, just a flowing conversation where things feel easy. For example, if you're talking about music and discover you both like the same artist, that's a natural opening. You could say something like, "You and me should go to one of their concerts sometime." It's simple, but it plants a picture without forcing anything. Rule 2 is tone. Confidence doesn't mean being loud or dramatic. It's more about calm certainty, the kind of energy that doesn't rush or seek approval. When you say it like it's completely natural for you, it lands differently. No nervous laughter, no over-explaining, just ease. Rule 3 is context. If the moment feels off, forced, or too early, don't push it. Attraction doesn't respond well to pressure. It responds to flow. The phrase only works when it fits the rhythm of the conversation, not when it interrupts it. And above all, it has to feel real. Not rehearsed, not practiced, not like something you memorized, but like a thought that naturally appeared in the moment. That's where it feels authentic. There's a very thin line between someone who creates attraction naturally and someone who tries to manufacture it. The difference is felt instantly. One feels effortless, the other feels forced. Used correctly, "you and me" becomes less of a phrase and more of a suggestion, a small mental image you leave behind that he carries with him afterward. But there's also a mistake that can destroy the effect completely. Too much intensity, too soon. If you've just met someone and suddenly say, "You and me should go out this Saturday," it doesn't create intrigue. It creates pressure. And pressure breaks curiosity. Attraction isn't about forcing direction. It's about lightly suggesting possibility. It should feel natural, not heavy. In the right moment, though, it works differently. During a fun, flowing conversation, you might say, "You and me would make a dangerously good team." It feels playful, not demanding. It adds energy instead of pressure. The key is not overusing it. If every other sentence becomes "you and me," it stops feeling special. Subtlety is what gives it weight. 1 or 2 well-timed moments are more powerful than constant repetition. And after you say it, don't chase a reaction. Don't wait for approval. Don't stare for validation. Just continue the conversation like nothing significant happened. That's what makes it linger. The contrast between impact and ease is what creates curiosity. Confidence is what holds everything together. Not neediness, not performance, not effort to impress, just grounded presence. Because when those words come from someone who is comfortable in themselves, they open possibility. But when they come from insecurity or need, they collapse instantly. And there's one final layer most people overlook: body language. Your posture, your eye contact, your voice. These often speak louder than the words themselves. If you say something like "you and me" while looking down or sounding unsure, your body contradicts your message. But if your voice is steady, your gaze is relaxed, and your expression is calm, the message lands differently. It feels aligned. As Carl Jung suggested, the body often expresses what the mind hasn't fully said yet. That means your physical presence either supports your words or weakens them. When everything aligns, your tone, your timing, your posture, you don't need to force anything. The interaction carries its own weight. And that's when a simple phrase stops being just words and becomes something that quietly stays in his mind long after the moment has passed. It's subtle, but it's powerful when done right. Picture this. You're in a light, easy conversation. There's a bit of playfulness in the air, and you say, "You and me would make a dangerous team." If you say it while looking away with a flat tone and no real presence, it's just words. Nothing sticks. But if you say it while holding calm eye contact, with a soft smile and relaxed energy, it becomes something else entirely. It turns into a moment, something he feels more than he analyzes. That's the difference. And there's an even bigger mistake that can undo everything, even if your words are perfect: being too focused on his reaction. If you say it and immediately start watching his face like you're waiting for approval, the energy collapses. It creates pressure. Instead, you say it, let it land, and continue the conversation naturally. No pause, no nervous waiting, just ease. That "I'm fine either way" energy is what actually makes it magnetic. Because attraction isn't only about what you say, it's about how free you are from needing a response. And this doesn't only apply to romance. Think about a work situation. A problem comes up in a meeting. Instead of saying, "We need to find a solution," you calmly look at a colleague and say, "You and me can figure this out fast." Now the energy changes. You've created a sense of trust, capability, and partnership in a single line. Or imagine reconnecting with a friend. Instead of the usual "How have you been?" you say, "You and me have a long overdue conversation." Suddenly, it doesn't feel like small talk anymore. It feels intentional, like the connection matters. This is what happens when language shifts from being routine to being emotionally directed. It creates what psychologists often describe as relational meaning, where simple words activate a sense of connection between people. And this phrase, "you and me," acts almost like a connector in that sense. It brings two people into the same frame, even if just for a moment. Because at the core, most people don't just want conversation. They want inclusion. They want to feel seen, chosen, and part of something, even in small, everyday interactions. That's why "we should catch up sometime" usually fades into nothing. It's vague. It carries no direction. But if you say, "You and me need to catch up this week," the energy changes immediately. It becomes clear, present, and intentional. Not aggressive, just defined. And something interesting happens when you start using this kind of language naturally. It doesn't just change how others respond, it changes how you show up. You become more direct, more present, more grounded in your communication. And people feel that shift instantly. They respond with more attention, more openness, more engagement, not because you're trying harder, but because your words carry more clarity and intention. Because at the end of the day, communication isn't about volume or perfection. It's about impact. It's about the feeling you leave behind after the words are spoken. And "you and me," when used consciously, becomes less of a phrase and more of a bridge. A simple way of turning ordinary interaction into something a little more meaningful, a little more alive. Not forced, not scripted, just present. And once you understand that, you stop focusing on saying the perfect thing and start focusing on saying things with the right presence behind them. And that's really where everything begins to shift. Because once you stop obsessing over finding the perfect line, you start understanding something more important. Presence always speaks louder than phrasing. A sentence doesn't carry meaning on its own. It takes on meaning from the person saying it, the energy behind it, and the moment it lives in. That's why two people can say the exact same words and create completely different outcomes. One can sound forgettable, while the other leaves a lasting impression. Not because of vocabulary, but because of emotional alignment. When your words match your internal state, they feel effortless. When they don't, they feel forced. And people may not always explain it, but they can sense the difference instantly. That's also why trying too hard usually backfires. The moment you start performing your communication, you shift out of connection and into impression making. And impression making is fragile. It depends on reaction, approval, and control. Real connection doesn't. Real connection has space in it. It allows silence without awkwardness. It allows pauses without panic. It allows you to say something and not immediately chase validation for it. That's what gives your words weight. So when a phrase like "you and me" works, it's not because it's magical. It's because it creates a shared frame. It briefly places two people in the same mental picture. But the real power isn't the phrase itself. It's the ease with which it's delivered. You're not trying to pull someone in. You're simply expressing something that already feels natural to you. And that's the part people respond to most. Because in everyday life, most communication is neutral, functional, safe, predictable. That's why even small shifts in tone or intention can feel surprisingly impactful. Not because you're saying something extraordinary, but because you're breaking the pattern of emotional flatness. And when a pattern breaks, attention follows. But here's the deeper layer most people miss. You don't need constant impact moments to be memorable. In fact, too many of them can make your presence feel unnatural. What actually builds lasting impression is contrast. Moments of ease mixed with moments of intention. Sometimes you're just present, listening, relaxed. Other times you introduce a small shift in direction, like a light suggestion or a shared idea. That balance is what makes your communication feel human instead of rehearsed. And over time, that consistency creates something more powerful than any single line ever could. Familiarity with intrigue. People feel comfortable with you, but also a little more awake when they're around you. That combination is rare because most people lean too far in one direction. Either they're completely safe and forgettable or overly intense and overwhelming. The middle ground, calm, grounded, intentional communication, is where real influence quietly exists. And it doesn't require changing your personality. It requires awareness. Awareness of timing, awareness of tone, awareness of how much space you're leaving in the interaction. When you develop that awareness, your conversations naturally become more engaging without effort. You stop over-explaining. You stop overthinking. You stop trying to force connection. Instead, you begin to allow it. And ironically, that's when people start leaning in more. Not because you're doing more, but because you're no longer overdoing anything. So at this point, it's not really about learning new phrases anymore. It's about refining how you show up in the space between your words. That quiet layer underneath everything you say. Because that's what people actually feel first. And once you understand that, communication stops being something you try to get right and starts becoming something you naturally express.